Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Jon and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
So it's good news, bad news, guys. Good news is remember to do the intro at the start. It's a signs of professionalism sneaking in there. Standard lack of professionalism, though. We're not really sure what episode this is. Like 10, 11, something like that. Is this a quarterfinal? Is that right? It's got to be the last quarterfinal, hasn't it? It must be, because this is to face the winner of. Lee's just laughing now. This is the last quarterfinal. So we've had four quarterfinals.
A proper big podcast out there. Then them starting off by saying we're not really sure what episode this is, but
I think that's our charm, to be honest. I think that's why we stand out, because all the professional podcasters have this element of organisation and knowing what's going on, and that's great. Yeah. But we're a little bit different to that. So thinking about it, it's got to be episode 13. So there must have been the introduction one, 8 first round matches, 4 second round matches, and I know you struggle with this, Lee, but 1 + 8 + 4 is 13. He's looking up and to the right. He's thinking. He's just out of shot. He's on the calculator.
I'll tell you word for that.
He's loading.
Yes, this is the last quarter, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he's loading up Excel and doing a little formula just to check if my maths was right there.
I was loading up Excel, but only for the tournament.
Of course, yeah. Cool. So this is the one where we've done a bit of I don't know what you want to call it, sneak, whatever. So Ultimate Warrior was supposed to be in this round, but we couldn't make it work. So he held us up for money, if you remember, a la SummerSlam '91. We couldn't afford 100 pence, let alone 100 grand. So he's been ousted. We didn't think it was fair for Andre to go through because he was actually first eliminated in the Survivor Series '89 tag match that we used. So the next person in that match was Bobby the Brain Heenan, who is not an active wrestler and is dead, although they all are. So eventually we got to Arn Anderson. It's a little bit like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. We got to Arn Anderson. And it's Arn Anderson versus Ric Flair. Now, their most famous match is from Fall Brawl '95, but they did have a couple of matches on Nitro as well, of which this is one of them. And we have chosen this one because the right person wins to make the rest of the bracketing work. So, we are episode 5 of Monday Nitro, October the 2nd, 1995. It is 32 minutes and 57 seconds in of a very short show. The whole show is 45 minutes and 18 seconds. I suppose
it's just an episode, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a 1-hour episode minus ad breaks.
Yeah.
Incredibly short. I used to really like Monday Nitro at the time. I found it a much easier watch. Maybe not at this point, maybe the next year when the Outsiders and NWO came along. I think it was an hour, whereas Raw was 2 hours, and it was an action-packed hour as opposed to 2 hours kind of stretched out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, Raw, I know it's been 3 hours for many years, but I've literally not watched a full episode of Raw in, it must be probably 20 years now. I actually couldn't be asked.
I'd say easily these days, I'd say 20, and I'm not exaggerating, I reckon 20 to 30% of Raw these days is telling you what's coming up in Raw.
Yeah.
And telling you what's just happened on Raw.
Well, that's modern TV for you in general, isn't it? I find that. Maybe not to that extent, but more so. That is the thing I've noticed in other programs.
I hate it.
You have let's say it's 12 minutes between ad breaks. The first 3 minutes will be recapping what happened before the ad break. Then there'll be 6 minutes of like fresh content, and then we'll talk about what's going to happen after the next ad break.
Yeah.
And then repeat.
I don't mind a recap at the start of something on what happened the previous week, say.
Yeah, that's fair.
All this coming up after the break, and then all this
before the break.
So yeah. I know I was here, I was watching.
Bring back the 90s. That's what we're agreeing, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's true that everything the way the world was when you were 18 was right, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was only talking to my mum the other day about evolving attitudes in like gender neutrality and inclusion and all that sort of stuff, and the reactions of different people to different things like that. I think that's what often happens with a lot of people. They get the mindset, essentially, that what the world was like when they were 18 was just by happy coincidence perfect. We were evolved enough, we were more progressive than our parents who lived in the past. but we're not as we're not as daft and PC and world gone mad as kids nowadays.
Don't ruin it. Let's just agree that it was.
Well, yeah, but I think every old man thinks that is the problem.
Steady on.
Or are we saying that just by happy coincidence, 1998 was the year that we got it just right?
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Excellent. Right, so Monday Nitro, 32 minutes, 57 seconds in, press and play in 3, 2, 1, off we go. Now that is a big crowd. Look at that.
So I'm glad you said you're a fan of Monday Night Raw. Sorry, Monday Night Nitro.
Monday Nitro.
Well, my questions today are regarding the Monday Night Wrestling War.
Oh yeah, go on.
Versus...
Are we going to talk about Ric Flair or Arn Anderson at any point?
No, not specifically. No.
That would be silly. Why would you do that? Go on, hit me with some questions.
Of course, and we can't talk about the match in question either whilst it's happening because that'd just be ridiculous.
That would never work. Look, attractive ladies in the crowd, that's not something you get in modern wrestling, is it? Well, you don't get crowds at all, but you know what I mean.
I always notice if Ric Flair or Shawn Michaels is ever coming out to the ring, the cameraman will always try and find a good-looking woman.
Yeah, true, yeah. I never thought about that. They obviously do. I mean, they're there for the whole show, but particularly they try and tie them in with someone who they want to have that connection with. Right, go on then. Hit me with some Monday Nitro questions.
Let's start with an easy one then. In what year did Monday Night Raw start?
Monday Night Raw was 1993, February I want to say the 3rd.
Well done.
Is that right? The right date? Or just the right year?
I only wrote down the year.
It would be around then, roughly.
I'm a big fan of both of these guys, by the way.
I am a big fan. What I've always thought with Arn Anderson is he's one of these that looked really old for a long time, but didn't really age. So here, he is definitely younger than we are now. Yeah. I don't know quite how old he is, but I'd say late 30s there, I reckon. Maybe 38, something like that. But he looked that age of about 45, 48, 10 years earlier when he was in the Brainbusters in WWF. Strange.
So he was born in 1958. So he's 37 there?
37, depending on when his birthday is, yeah. Do you know where he gets the Anderson surname from?
I could look it up now, but I'll let you tell me instead.
Yeah, so his real name is Marty, I've never heard it said out loud, but Lund, I believe it's pronounced. When he first broke into wrestling, he bears quite a strong resemblance to Ole Anderson, who was part of the original Four Horsemen as well. So they put them together as the Anderson brothers. And there's several other people who've wrestled under the name Anderson who share a similar look. There was C.W. Anderson in ECW, who was completely unrelated to any of them, but again shared that very similar look. I think there was possibly one more. And I think also Arn was billed as being Ric Flair's cousin at some point early in his career.
Well, I've not heard that, the last bit, but I was today years old when I found out that Arn Anderson and Ole Anderson aren't related.
No, they do look very similar, don't they?
Yeah.
They're probably the two that look the most similar, but there's a few others of them as well that have that look, shall we say.
Yeah. So in 1993, rumours started going around that WCW wanted to hire an executive producer. Who did they hire?
Well, I presume it would be Bischoff in 93, would it?
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, so Bischoff was quite a surprise for a lot in the industry. He'd come in previously as, I think he started as an announcer and then done some backstage stuff, but he, to some degree, came out of nowhere to be announced as the executive vice president, or whatever his official job title was. But the success of WCW over the next few years shows it to be a wise choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the problem previously they'd always had was they'd put in former wrestlers and bookers in that position, and whilst they might have good knowledge of wrestling, they might be able to book a good show, they don't necessarily know how to run a successful wrestling company to that degree.
Yeah, you can imagine how that would be a natural step, but it makes sense to, I suppose. So what was Bischoff's previous? Was he just a fan who?
So it originally started in the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, in the mid to probably late 80s it would have been. I think he originally started doing something like telesales because he'd got a background in sales. Then I think he maybe did some sort of announcement, maybe some backstage stuff. Then the AWA folded. around 89, 90. I think he'd probably gone to WCW at that point, roughly, and then spent a couple of years. I kind of might be wrong on this, but definitely did some announcing. I think he did like a salesy video, so maybe like trying to sell the merchandise in those short bits you get between matches.
Right.
Moving his way gradually up, and obviously making the right friends and connections in the right places.
Yeah. So Monday Nitro aired in 1995, but do you know what month it debuted in?
September.
Do you know what day?
I could work it out from this. If this is episode 5, I'm going to say September the 5th.
September the 4th.
Ooh, I was close. Yeah. Do you know who made an appearance on the first Monday Nitro, sending shockwaves through the industry?
That's not one of my questions. Go on.
Lex Luger. So Luger had only wrestled the night before for
That's one of my
WWF.
questions.
Sorry, mate. He'd wrestled the night before for WWF, but his contract had expired. He'd obviously heard that WCW, who he'd formerly wrestled for and was former world champion for, were launching the TV show, and quietly contacted Bischoff or whoever else it was. Probably sent Sting a text, I'd have thought, or that's pre-text days. Probably sent him a fax saying that he's not in contract, and just walked out in the main event of that show, which I think was Hogan versus, it was the former Big Boss Man, who I want to say was wrestling as Big Bubba Rogers at that point. Luger walks out, which is a complete shock, because literally the night before he's wrestled for WWF. As far as everyone knows, he is a WWF wrestler, which very much set the tone for the level of surprise and excitement that Nitro would bring to the table over the coming years.
Brilliant.
Anderson, for me, he's a great wrestler, but his best bit was always the spine buster. His spine buster was I remember rewinding it on an old tape. I think it was something like Best of Saturday Night main event. I think it was possibly him and Tully at the Brain Busters against possibly the Rockers. I remember rewinding it, watching his spine buster, because it looked so much more impactful than a standard spine buster that anyone else did.
Yeah.
That I was trying to figure out, does he do something else? Does he are there legs? Is something different happening? But I think he just drilled him with it. I don't think there was any. Obviously, it's good timing and technique and all that, but I think he just absolutely drove him into the mat. And
yeah,
I remember with a lot of these things in the 90s, particularly like looking at stuff and rewinding stuff and going like, how they faked that, for want of a better word. How did they make that not hurt? And then you realise actually a lot of the time they don't. It just really hurts. It's just one quite large man throwing another quite large man into a fairly solid bit of wood with minimal, it's got a bit of bounce to it and a bit of padding on it, but it just hurts. It's funny as well, like you think of these guys and like Hogan and all that, and the guys in the late 80s as being some sort of supermen. And I mean, they are big, strong guys, but actually they just take a lot of painkillers and died young because of it. They weren't indestructible. They were in a lot of pain. Yeah, they were in a lot of pain in most of these matches, and it killed them. So anyway,
which former mega WWF star signed for WCW in June '94?
June '94. It's got to be Hogan, hasn't it?
And then what about December '94?
Savage.
Correct.
What do you think about the reason that Savage and Vince McMahon never reconciled? Rumors. Do you not know what the rumors are?
Go on, tell me.
So Savage leaves WWF in '94, December. Vince gives him a send-off on announcement on Raw, and genuinely seems sad that he's left. He mainly left because Vince had been progressively moving into more of an elder statesman role, whereas he felt he still had a lot to give as an active wrestler. I believe he wanted to work a feud with Shawn Michaels and felt that his days weren't numbered, and Vince perhaps to some degree did. So he left seemingly in good terms.
Did he call commentary then?
He did, yeah. It was him and Vince and probably Bobby Heenan, I think, at that point. And so he left seemingly in good terms. And at some point over the ensuing years, obviously the relationship soured. He never came back after WCW folded. He never did any sort of Legends appearance. And the rumour is that Vince found out some years later that Randy Savage had slept with a teenage Stephanie McMahon.
Holy shit.
Now that's that's interference. Brian Pillman's just coming in and interfered, causing is that a DQ win for Arn Anderson? Is it presumably?
Yeah,
So yeah, that was the rumor. The only strong denial I've ever heard of it is Bruce Pritchard on his Something to Wrestle podcast. Strongly denied it and said it was just stupid and made up. That's probably what he would say if it was true, but there's clearly something happened. It's not just your standard, you know, he fell out with Hogan, then Hogan was in a position to make him some money and come back, and they buried the hatchet. Same with Bret Hart, same with everyone else came back. Warrior came back. They all came back apart from Savage.
So when we say Stephanie, we're not talking 18.
I don't know any more specifics than that. It may be 18, it may be 19, it may be 20 odd, but you know, I think it's the sleeping with his daughter bit particularly that's,
Oh,
and obviously the age may be a factor, but
well,
I don't think
in
it'd have been okay. I
in
don't
his
think it'd be
defense,
okay if it'd been on her 16th birthday, if that's what you're saying. When he was like 44.
it was a Randy Savage.
Well, that's the clues in the name, Vince.
You're gonna
Like,
call
come
Randy
on.
Savage. You can't then start moaning.
Just imagine his defence. It'd be like a Vince, yeah. I'm not going to even try and do the impression, but it's like you left me with your teenage daughter. My name is Randy Savage. What did you expect to happen?
Who's babysitting tonight, Vince? Oh, Randy Savage.
So, just random aside there. So we've just cut to the three-man commentary team there. It's Bischoff, Bobby Heenan, and do you know who the guy on the left is there?
I feel like I recognise him.
It's called Steve McMichael. He played for the Chicago Bears, I think it was, American football team. And he came in, I think at this point he's possibly still an announcer, but then became an active wrestler and part of the Four Horsemen. He was an awful wrestler, awful, but he was charismatic and a little bit of fun and what have you.
Yeah.
But the reason I particularly point it out is he's recently been diagnosed with ALS, you know, motor neuron syndrome, Lou Gehrig's thing. And I saw a video only maybe a week or two of him now, you know, big, strong guy in his youth, and he's gone down. I think he dropped from 15 stone to 7 stone in a couple of months.
Oh, wow.
And he may have died since. Like, he looked like he didn't have long left.
Right.
So, next week's main event is Sting versus John Tenta, who I think at that point is called Shark. Sabu. I forgot Sabu was in WCW at this point, versus Jerry Lynn under a mask as Mr. JL. Got Big Bubba versus Hawk. That's a stacked card, that is. So the result of that match was Arn Anderson being disqualified. That's it. So Ric Flair goes through. Disqualification there came from Brian Pillman running in. So I think this is probably very early days of the loose cannon period of Brian Pillman's career. Do you know much about that?
No.
So Pillman, and I only watched did you see the Dark Side of the Ring thing on Pillman? I sent you a link to it.
Yes.
Have you watched it? Yeah.
Did I watch the full? Did you send me the full episode? Yes, I did. Of course, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I sent you episode 1, and episode 2's been out since. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah,
But
that's what I watched on my actual phone.
yeah, that's it. So that I think is roughly the start of that. Pillman's working a gimmick in order to try and increase his value for when his contract expires, and there's various different versions of events as to how that all went down. But he was definitely living a gimmick that at least a fairly high proportion of people thought was real, thought he'd actually lost the plot.
Yeah.
My favourite part of that Pillman documentary, though, was his old Cincinnati Bengals strength coach, Kim Wood.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. What did he say about Vince McMahon? I think they said, what do you think about what you did with Vince or something like that? And he goes, well, what do you do to a whore? You fuck him. Bless him. He's more of a worker than most of the guys that he helped Pillman work, that guy.
No, it was excellent, that was.
Awesome. So, yeah, well, I think that was a good match. Seemed all right. So that leaves us with Ric Flair versus Scott Hall. And is it Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar for the other one?
Yes.
And I think we're going to have to go for a Lesnar-Flair final, aren't we? That's what we said.
Yeah, we'd have to, yeah.
So we're going to have to find a match. I think there's one from possibly 1999, another one of the early 1999 WCW matches that we're going to watch. which is Flair beating Scott Hall. I think I looked on cage matches for that. And then we need to find Lesnar beating Roman Reigns. Maybe at WrestleMania. That was quite funny when he was beating clean at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
That was it.
You want me to reel off the rest of these questions?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Only 4. We've got a feeling they're all easy for you, though. How much did Vince McMahon fire Shawn Michaels for an act he felt was inappropriate?
Fine him. And this is during the Monday Night Wars.
Yeah.
10 grand.
Correct.
Ooh, what was that then?
Is that a guess?
Yeah, well, it's a guess based on a very vague memory.
Annoyingly, then when I saw this question, I thought, oh, I better write down the details for this one. And annoyingly, it didn't have the details.
It was either going to be 10 or 100. It's always 10 or 100, isn't it?
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm trying to think what it would have been. Something to do with Bret Hart in '97, I'm guessing. Well, if anyone's listening at home and you know, please comment on the video.
Or it won't be anything to do with when they broke kayfabe, will it? In the middle of
Curtain call.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. Well, ask me the next question. I'm having a quick Google.
Who does Stone Cold have a famous confrontation with on January 19th, 1998?
Mike Tyson.
Well done.
So what did you call him, the first person? Not Mike Tyson. What did you call the other guy?
Stone Cold?
No, it's Cold Stone. That's what Mike calls him. That's his little name for him. He calls him Cold Stone. So the night before that, January the 18th, my wife's 18th birthday, funnily enough, at the Royal Rumble, Mike Tyson is being interviewed. I think he's sat next to a young Shane McMahon in the skybox, whatever you call it. And he's trying to pass himself off as a big fan of the wrestling. And he talks about how much he loves Cold Stone and how Shawn Michaels is a young, hungry, up-and-coming tiger when he's in his about to be second to last match for 4.5 years.
Brilliant.
He's a big fan. I think the irony is actually, I believe Tyson is a bit of a fan. I think he just got a bit confused.
Yeah, because I'm sure he did something in WWF once as well, didn't he? I seem to remember.
Tyson?
Yeah.
Well, he did that, obviously, and then he did an appearance once with Chris Jericho.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, well, he was the guest ring enforcer then for WrestleMania that year. So he did the pull apart with Austin the night after the Royal Rumble, and then a number of other. I think it was a public workout. I think DX did a public workout that Tyson and Austin got involved in, and then maybe he appeared on an episode or 2 of Raw. And then he was originally supposed to be the guest referee for the main event of WrestleMania 14, Austin versus Michaels. But I think they didn't trust him not to mess it up.
Right.
So they put him as an outside enforcer. And if I remember correctly, he did mess it up a little bit. I think the ref went down and Tyson had to make the count. And he made a super fast count. This is the crowning of your new top babyface in Steve Austin. And he wins the title on a fast count.
All right. How many consecutive weeks did Nitro beat?
83.
Well done. And when was the last Nitro?
March the 26th, 2001.
How did you just? Oh.
A lot of it's context. Like, I mean, for some of those things, like the 83 weeks, that's just a well-known thing. Like Eric Bischoff does a podcast called 83 Weeks, and I've never listened to it, but I know that's the name of the podcast. That's a thing that Nitro won 83 weeks in a row. The date of that, I mean, I knew it was late March. It's only just been the 20th anniversary of it, so I remember people around then.
Right.
And I mean, I would have gone for something around then, but the 6 just rang true.
No, well done.
Done well today, haven't I? Do I get a prize at any point?
Very well. Well, you get me being impressed.
Anything that I'd be bothered about, or could I get the respect of someone whose opinion I care about? Would that be possible? Or maybe Jamie? Let's get Jamie to listen to this. And if he's impressed, then
get Jamie to acknowledge that you work.
Well, that's get Jamie to acknowledge that I work by impressing him with my vast knowledge of 20-year-old wrestling. I think, if anything, it will have the opposite effect.
The irony.
Right, guys. Okay, so we've got semi-finals next week and then the final. Thank you for listening.